Rich CEO finds girl on cardboard. What he discovers shocks him. One night at 1 a.m., a rich CEO named Richard was driving home after long meetings. The roads were empty. And the city was silent. Richard's eyes were tired, his head heavy from the long day. Suddenly he saw something move in front of his car. He hit the brakes hard. His heart raced. Lying in the middle of the road was a young girl, asleep on a piece of cardboard. Richard stepped out quickly. "Hey! What are you doing here? You can't sleep in the street. Are you out of your mind?" The girl opened her eyes slowly. She looked scared, but she did not move. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "My parents, they died in a car crash. My stepmother threw me out. I have nowhere to go." Richard froze. The words hit him like a stone. A child. Left alone in the city at night, he looked at her. She was maybe 11 or 12, clothes torn, hair messy, eyes full of pain. He asked gently. "What's your name?" "Emily," she whispered. Richard sighed. "Emily, you can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Come with me. I'll take you somewhere safe." She shook her head. "No, I don't trust people. Everyone leaves me. Everyone lies." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Richard bent lower, his voice calm. "I'm not here to lie to you. I just don't want you to get hurt. Trust me for tonight. If you don't feel safe, you can walk away. But let me help you now." Emily stared at him silent. After a pause, she gave a small nod. Richard opened the car door for her. She sat in the back, hugging a small teddy bear. Richard glanced at her through the mirror. She looked so fragile, yet so strong. As he drove on, he thought, why did I meet her tonight? Why me? He didn't know yet. But this night would change his life forever. The car moved quietly through the empty streets. Richard kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Emily sat still in the back seat, hugging her old teddy bear tightly. Her eyes looked out of the window. But she didn't seem to be watching anything. Richard felt an unusual silence inside the car. Normally, after long meetings, he would think about contracts, phone calls, and money. But tonight was different. His mind was full of questions about the little girl behind him. Finally, he asked gently, "Emily, how long have you been out here?" Her voice was quiet. "Since yesterday. I tried to sleep near the bus stop but people pushed me away. So I came here. It was the only place left." Richard tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He had grown up in a rich family. He had never known the kind of pain this girl was speaking of. He looked at her again in the mirror. "Did you eat anything?" Emily shook her head slowly. "Just some crackers I found in the trash." Richard's chest felt heavy. He wanted to say something, but words didn't come easily. Instead, he pressed the pedal and turned toward a diner that stayed open all night. When they arrived, he parked the car and looked at Emily. "Come on, let's get you something warm to eat." Emily hesitated. "I don't have money." Richard gave her a small smile. "Don't worry about that. Tonight, you're with me." She followed him inside, still clutching her teddy bear. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the diner. A waitress looked at Richard. Then at the little girl beside him. For a moment, she seemed confused. But Richard didn't care what people thought. They sat at a booth. Richard opened the menu and slid it toward Emily. "Pick whatever you like." Emily stared at the menu as if it were a puzzle. She ran her finger over the pictures, then whispered, Can I have pancakes?" Richard nodded. "Of course. Pancakes it is. And hot chocolate too." While they waited for the food, Emily kept her eyes on the table. Richard leaned forward. "Emily, do you have any relatives, maybe an aunt, an uncle? Anyone who can take care of you?" She shook her head. "No one. My stepmother said I was a burden. She told me to leave, so I left." The words hit Richard again. He could feel anger rising inside him. How could someone throw a child onto the street like trash? He looked at her small hands gripping the teddy bear, and felt a lump in his throat. The waitress brought the pancakes and hot chocolate. Emily's eyes lit up for the first time. She grabbed the fork and began eating quickly, almost as if she thought someone might take the food away. Richard watched her quietly. He didn't stop her. He understood. When she finally slowed down, Richard asked, "Emily, do you want me to call the police? They can help find a safe place for you." Emily's face changed. Her fork froze in the air. "No, please, not the police. They'll send me back. I can't go back there." Her voice shook with fear. Richard leaned back thinking. He knew she was right. The system would likely send her to a shelter or back to her stepmother. Neither option sounded safe. He sighed. All right, no police. For now, you stay with me. Just for tonight. Emily looked at him with wide eyes. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Richard paused. That was the question he had been asking himself since he found her. He could have driven past. He could have called someone else to handle it. But something about her face, her voice, had touched him deeply. He finally said, because sometimes, life puts people in front of us for a reason. Maybe tonight. That reason is you. Emily looked down at her pancakes again, silent. After they finished eating, Richard paid the bill and led Emily back to the car. The streets were still quiet, the night deep and dark. Richard thought about his mansion. The large house with empty rooms, guarded gates. And no one waiting for him inside. When they reached his home, Emily's eyes widened. The mansion stood tall, with glowing lights and a long driveway. Do you live here? She asked softly. Richard nodded, yes. Don't worry, it's safe. She followed him inside, clutching her teddy bear like a shield. The marble floors and high ceilings seemed to overwhelm her. She whispered, it's bigger than a school. Richard almost laughed, but there was sadness in his smile. All the space, all the wealth, yet he had lived here alone for years. He showed her a guest room. The bed was soft, covered with clean sheets. Emily stood at the doorway staring. Can I really sleep here? Of course, Richard said. This is your room tonight. Take a shower if you want. There are fresh towels. I'll bring you some clothes. Emily walked slowly to the bed and sat down. She hugged her teddy bear tightly, as if afraid it would vanish. Then she looked at Richard. Thank you. Richard nodded and left her to rest. But as he walked back to his own room, his thoughts were heavy. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring. He only knew one thing. This night had already changed something inside him. For the first time in years, Richard didn't feel like the powerful CEO everyone knew. He felt like a man facing a choice. Ignore the girl and return to his world of business, or step into her world of pain and try to change it. And deep down, he already knew his answer. The first rays of sunlight touched the wide windows of Richard's mansion. For years, mornings in this house had been the same. Quiet, cold, and empty. But today, something was different. Richard walked down the hallway, his footsteps soft on the polished floor. He paused outside the guest room door, listening. From inside, he heard faint movement. Emily was awake. He knocked lightly. Emily, can I come in? There was a pause, then a small voice replied. Yes. Richard opened the door. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her teddy bear in her lap. She looked cleaner now, her hair brushed after a shower. The fresh clothes he had left for her were slightly loose, but she seemed more comfortable than she had the night before. Did you sleep well? Richard asked. Emily nodded slowly. Yes, the bed was soft. I haven't slept like that in a long time. Richard smiled. Good. You needed rest. He motioned toward the dining room. Come on. Breakfast is ready. Emily followed him quietly. The long dining table looked almost too big for just two people. But today it didn't feel as empty. The housekeeper had prepared eggs, toast, and fruit. Emily's eyes widened at the spread. Eat as much as you want, Richard said. She picked up a piece of toast carefully, as if she wasn't sure if she was allowed. Then she began eating with small bites. Richard sat across from her, sipping coffee. He studied her, thinking. After a while he asked, Emily, what grade are you in at school? Her face fell. I haven't been to school for months. After my parents died, my stepmother said she wouldn't pay for it. She said I wasn't worth it. Richard's jaw tightened. He tried to stay calm, but inside he felt anger at the cruelty of it. Education is important, he said firmly. Every child deserves it. Don't worry. We'll figure something out. Emily looked at him carefully. Why do you care? You don't even know me. Richard set his cup down. He leaned forward slightly. Emily, sometimes caring doesn't need a reason. Sometimes you see someone suffering, and you just know you can't walk away. Emily lowered her eyes. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she whispered. No one has ever said that to me before. Richard felt a pang in his chest. He realized how much this girl had been through, and how much she had been denied. Love, safety, and trust. After breakfast, Richard had to leave for work. But he didn't want to leave Emily alone. He called his assistant, Anna. A woman he trusted completely. When Anna arrived, she looked surprised to see the young girl sitting on the couch with a teddy bear. Richard explained quickly. "This is Emily. She's staying here for now. Please, take care of her today. Show her around, make sure she feels safe." Anna nodded warmly. "Of course." Before leaving, Richard turned to Emily. "I'll be back tonight. Stay here with Anna, alright? You're safe here." Emily gave a small nod, though her eyes still held a flicker of doubt. The day at the office felt different for Richard. He sat in his meetings, but his mind kept drifting back to the mansion. He kept seeing Emily's face, the way she clutched her teddy bear, the fear in her eyes when she spoke of her stepmother. For years he had built his empire on numbers, deals and cold decisions. But now, for the first time, something personal weighed heavier than business. At lunch, his friend and business partner, Mark, noticed his distraction. "Richard, you've been quiet all morning. What's going on?" Richard hesitated. Should he tell him? Finally, he said, "I found a girl last night, on the street. She was sleeping on cardboard." Mark frowned. "And you brought her home?" "Yes." Richard explained briefly about Emily's parents, the stepmother, the way he found her. Mark leaned back. "Richard, this is dangerous. You don't know her. She could be lying. What if this causes trouble for you, for the company?" Richard's eyes hardened. "She's just a child. Mark, she had nothing. Even if there's risk, I couldn't leave her there." The Mark sighed. "You've always been too soft when it comes to things like this. But I get it. Just be careful." Richard nodded but said no more. Inside, he knew this wasn't about business or risk, it was about doing what was right. That evening, when Richard returned home, Emily was sitting in the living room with Anna. They were looking at picture books. When Emily saw him, her face brightened slightly. "You came back," she said quietly. Richard smiled. "Of course I did. I told you I would." They had dinner together, and afterward, Richard sat with Emily in the living room. She seemed more relaxed now, though still guarded. "Emily," he said gently, "I know you've been through a lot. But I want you to know you're not alone anymore. Not while you're here." Her eyes filled with tears. She wiped them quickly, trying to hide them. "I don't want to be a burden." Richard's voice softened. "You're not a burden. You're a child who deserves care and love. Don't ever think otherwise." Emily looked at him for a long moment as if searching for truth in his words. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." That night, as Richard watched her walk back to the guest room, he felt something shift inside him again. For years, he had chased money and power. But none of it compared to the simple act of giving a lost child a safe place to rest. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test him more than any business deal ever could. The next morning, Richard woke up earlier than usual. Normally, he would drag himself out of bed, check his phone, and prepare for another long day of meetings. But today felt different. His first thought wasn't about business, it was about Emily. He walked to the guest room and knocked lightly. "Emily, are you awake?" A small voice answered.
"Yes."
Richard opened the door. Emily was sitting on the bed, dressed in the same clothes he had given her. She had neatly folded the blanket, and placed her teddy bear beside her. For a girl who had been on the streets, she seemed careful, almost too careful. As if she didn't want to upset anyone. "Good morning," Richard said with a smile. "Come on, let's have breakfast." They sat together at the dining table. Emily ate slowly, but Richard noticed she was more relaxed than the day before. He decided it was time to ask a few questions. "Emily," he began gently, "I want to understand more about you. Can you tell me about your parents? What happened?" Emily's face darkened. She looked down at her plate. "They died in a car accident. It was raining that night. I was at home with a babysitter. The police came to tell me they were gone." Her voice cracked. But she didn't cry. It was as if she had already cried too much to have tears left. Richard's heart ached. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. Emily went on, her tone flat. "After that, my stepmother took me in. At first, she pretended to care. But soon she started saying I was too much trouble. She didn't want to buy food for me. She didn't want to pay for school. She said I was just another mouth to feed. Last week, she told me to leave, so I left. Richard clenched his jaw. He couldn't believe the cruelty. A woman throwing a child out like garbage. It was unthinkable. Emily, he said firmly. You did nothing wrong. None of this is your fault. She looked at him carefully. You really think that?
Yes.
Richard said. I don't just think it. I know it. For the first time, Emily's lips curved into a faint smile. It was small, almost hidden, but Richard noticed. Too later that day. Richard had to go to the office again. Before leaving, he called Anna to stay with Emily. But Emily looked nervous when he stood near the door with his briefcase. You'll come back, right? She asked quietly. Richard stopped. He walked back and knelt down so he was eye level with her. Emily, listen to me. I will always come back. You are safe here. Do you understand? Emily hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Richard gave her a reassuring smile before leaving. At the office, his mind kept wandering back to Emily. He found himself staring at his phone, tempted to call Anna just to check in. Finally, during lunch, he did. Anna, he said quickly. How's Emily? Anna chuckled softly. She's fine, Richard. Don't worry so much. She's been reading books in the library. She seems to like it there. Richard felt relief wash over him. Good. Keep her busy, and let me know if she needs anything. Of course. Anna replied. But Richard, may I say something? Go ahead. She's starting to trust you. Be careful with that. For a child like her, trust is fragile. Don't break it. Her words stayed in Richard's mind all afternoon. That evening, when he returned, he found Emily sitting on the floor of the library, surrounded by books. She looked up as soon as he walked in. Her eyes lit up, and she quickly stood. You came back, she said, a little louder than usual. Richard smiled. Of course, I told you I would. Emily picked up a book and held it out. I was reading this. It's about a girl who gets lost but finds her way home again. Richard took the book and glanced at it. Sounds like a good story. Emily nodded. Then, after a pause, she asked, do you think I'll ever have a home again? The question hit Richard hard. He set the book down and looked at her seriously. Emily, you do have a home now. This place, as long as you need it, is your home. Her eyes widened. Really? Yes, Richard said firmly. And you don't have to be afraid anymore. Emily hugged her teddy bear and whispered, thank you. Later that night, Richard sat alone in his study. He poured himself a glass of water, and stared out the window. For years, his life had been measured in profits and losses, deals and deadlines. But now, all of that seemed smaller compared to one lost child. He thought about her words, do you think I'll ever have a home again? Richard knew the answer he wanted to give. But giving it meant more than words. It meant responsibility. It meant stepping into a role he had never imagined for himself. A part of him wondered if he was ready. But another part, deep inside, already knew, he couldn't let Emily go. Not back to the streets. Not back to pain. This was no longer just about kindness. It was about purpose. As Richard turned off the lights and prepared for bed, he passed Emily's room. The door was slightly open. He peeked inside. Emily was fast asleep, the teddy bear tucked under her arm, her breathing soft and steady. For the first time, she looked peaceful. Richard stood there for a long moment. Then he whispered to himself, you're safe now, Emily. I promise. And in that quiet promise, Richard felt something change in his own life. The mansion no longer felt empty. The silence no longer felt cold. For the first time in years, Richard wasn't alone. The next few days passed quietly. But for Richard, life felt anything but ordinary. For the first time in years, he had someone waiting for him at home. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like an empty shell. Every morning, Emily joined him for breakfast. At first, she was shy, speaking only a few words. But slowly, she began to open up. She started asking small questions, about the food, the house, even about Richard himself. One morning, as she spread jam on her toast, she looked up and asked, Richard, why do you live alone? Don't you have a family? The question caught him off guard. He put down his coffee cup and thought for a moment. I used to have family, he said slowly. But life changed. My parents passed away when I was older, and I never got married. Emily tilted her head. Why not? Richard gave a small smile. I was too busy chasing work. I thought money and success were the most important things. I didn't realize how lonely it would feel later. Emily looked down at her plate. I know what lonely feels like. Richard's chest tightened. He reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. You don't have to feel that way anymore. Emily glanced at him, then gave a small, almost shy smile. That afternoon, Richard took Emily to the park. She had been inside the mansion for days, and he thought fresh air would help. The moment they stepped onto the grass, Emily's eyes lit up. Children were running, playing on swings, chasing each other. For a second, she froze, as if unsure whether she belonged there. Richard crouched down beside her. Go on, he encouraged. Play. You deserve it. Emily hugged her teddy bear tighter. What if they don't like me? Richard shook his head. You're stronger than you think. Just try. Slowly, Emily walked toward the swings. At first, she sat alone, watching others. Then, a little girl came up and asked if she wanted a push. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Soon she was swinging back and forth, her hair flying, her face breaking into laughter. Richard watched from a distance. For the first time, he saw her look like a normal child. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. When she ran back to him later, breathless and smiling, she said, "That was fun." Richard smiled back. "See, you belong here, just like everyone else." That evening, as they drove home, Emily asked, "Richard, do you ever get scared?" The question surprised him. "Scared? About what?" "About being alone," she said softly. Richard gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes, sometimes. More than I'd like to admit." Emily hugged her teddy bear. "Me too. But it feels less scary with you." Richard's throat tightened. He didn't answer right away. He simply reached over and gently patted her shoulder. Over the next week, their bond grew stronger. Emily started following Richard around the house, asking questions about everything she saw. She wanted to know how the big grandfather clock worked, why the library had so many books, and why the paintings on the wall showed people she didn't recognize. Richard answered each question patiently. It reminded him of something he had forgotten. That children are curious about the world, hungry to learn, hungry to be heard. One evening, she pointed at one of the paintings. "Who's that?" Richard looked at the portrait of an older man. "That's my father. He built the company before me." Emily studied it, then asked, "Would he have liked me?" Richard felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, Emily. He would have liked you very much." She smiled softly and returned to her book, as if satisfied with the answer. But not everything was easy. Sometimes, Emily woke up at night from bad dreams. Richard would hear her crying and rush to her room. One night, she sat up in bed trembling. "It was the accident again," she whispered. "I see it in my dreams. The car, the rain, then nothing." Richard sat beside her and put a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe now. The dream can't hurt you." Emily leaned against him, tears wetting her cheeks. "Do you promise?" Richard tightened his arm around her. "I promise." She eventually fell back asleep, her head resting against his side. Richard stayed there until he was sure she was calm. As he looked at her sleeping face, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just helping her anymore. He was protecting her. The following Saturday, Richard made a decision. He took Emily to a small bookstore downtown. Inside, her eyes sparkled as she looked at the shelves. "Can I really pick something?" she asked. "Anything you want," Richard replied. She walked slowly through the aisles, running her fingers over the spines of books. Finally, she chose a story about a brave girl who never gave up. When they left, Emily held the book tightly, smiling from ear to ear. "Thank you," she said. Richard looked down at her and smiled. "You're welcome." That night, as they sat in the living room, Emily read aloud from her new book. Her voice was soft but steady. Richard listened carefully, more focused on her happiness than on the words. When she finished a chapter, she looked at him. "Richard." "Yes. Do you think we'll always be together?" The question caught him off guard. He paused, searching for the right words. Finally, he said, "Emily, I don't know what the future holds. But I know this, I'm not going anywhere. You're safe with me. For as long as you need." Emily's eyes shone. She hugged her teddy bear and whispered, That's all I wanted to hear. Richard leaned back in his chair. His heart heavy but full. He had built his life around business, wealth, and power. But sitting here with a child who had lost everything, he realized something. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about family. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The days turned into weeks. For Richard, life had changed in ways he never expected. He still went to work, still sat in meetings, still signed big deals. But every evening, he rushed home. Not to an empty mansion, but to Emily waiting for him. Sometimes she would sit on the steps with her teddy bear, watching the driveway until his car appeared. Other times, she would surprise him with a drawing or a story she wrote. The house was no longer silent. It was alive. One evening, as they ate dinner together, Emily put down her fork and looked at him seriously. "Richard, what will happen to me later? I can't stay forever. Right?" The words pierced his heart. He had thought about it many times but never said it aloud. "Emily," he said gently, "I don't want you to worry about that right now. You're safe here. That's what matters." But Emily shook her head. "I hear things at school. Other kids talk about families, about parents. What if someone comes and takes me away?" Richard leaned forward. "Do you want to stay with me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. She nodded silently. Richard took a deep breath. "Then, maybe it's time we make this official." The next morning, Richard called his lawyer. They arranged a meeting with social services. Richard explained everything. The night he found Emily on the street, her story, and how she had been living with him since then. The officer listened carefully, then asked, "Mr. Sterling, are you saying you wish to adopt this child?" Richard looked at Emily, who sat beside him holding her teddy bear. She looked nervous, clutching his sleeve. Richard smiled at her, then turned back to the officer. "Yes. I want to adopt her. She deserves a home. She deserves love, and I want to give her both." Emily's eyes widened. She whispered, "Really?" Richard nodded. "Really?" For the first time since he met her, Emily hugged him tightly without hesitation. "I want that too," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. The process took weeks. Paperwork, interviews, inspections. Richard, the man who could close billion-dollar deals in hours, found himself waiting anxiously for signatures and approvals. But he didn't mind. For Emily, it was worth everything. Finally, the day came. They sat in a small courtroom. The judge looked over the documents, then smiled. "From this day forward, Emily Harper will be legally adopted by Richard Sterling." Emily gasped. Richard squeezed her hand. The judge continued. "Congratulations. You're officially a family." Tears filled Emily's eyes. She looked up at Richard and whispered, "Dad." Richard froze. The word hit him harder than any success he had ever achieved. Slowly, he smiled, his own eyes wet. "Yes, Emily. Dad. Plucky life after that was different in every way." Richard still worked as CEO, but his priorities shifted. He no longer stayed at the office late into the night. He no longer drowned in endless meetings. Instead, he made time for school events, weekend trips, and bedtime stories. He learned how to braid hair, though not very well, and how to pack a school lunch. He even learned patience, something no business deal had ever taught him. Emily blossomed too. The shy, broken girl who once slept on cardboard now laughed freely, played with friends and dreamed of the future. One night as Richard tucked her into bed, she asked, "Dad, do you think Mom and Dad, my real parents, would be happy?" Richard sat on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair back. "I think they'd be proud. They'd be happy knowing you're safe, loved, and still shining." Emily smiled softly. "I think so too." 2 years later, Richard often thought back to that night on the empty street. The night he almost drove past. The night he found Emily sleeping on cardboard. He realized it wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was a second chance, for both of them. For Emily, it was a chance to have a family again, For him, it was a chance to learn what life was really about. Not money. Not power. Not titles. But love. The world still saw Richard Sterling as a billionaire CEO. But Emily saw him as something far greater. Her father. And that was the only title that ever truly mattered. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon, so you never miss the next story. And, if you've ever experienced a moment where kindness changed your life, share it in the comments below. I'd love to read your story. Thank you for giving me your precious time. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in second chances.